now. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the S&P Sports Show. I'm your host, Shawn Stewart, alongside my co-host, Mr. Anthony Paulis, and it is September 13th, 2022. Glad to have you on tonight's program. So we have a lot of stuff to cover. We got to definitely talk about week one and definitely fantasy football because I'm very excited with my win. How you doing, Anthony?
Well, we got a three-dog night going on here today, as you can see, Shawn. Looks like I've been joined by a third co-host tonight, Rolo.
I see him.
Yep, Rolo. Rolo Walter Kowalski from Detroit.
Okay.
Anyway, Gran Torino right here. If you're familiar
Gotcha.
with the film, he's just like Walt Kowalski in that movie, to the T. Just as much of a jerk, but lovable nonetheless. So,
Okay,
but man, that week one in the NFL. Hey, I got a W in our fantasy league. I'll take it. But man, what a crazy week one. Let's just go with the most shocking win of the week. Probably the Giants.
That's one of them.
I did not think they were going to go on the road, down 13-0 at half, and pull that win out. Hey, mad guts for going for two there at the end. A lot of teams would just kick the extra point and go for overtime. That was not the case. So, mad props there. The Titans' defense was just awful in the second
Especially
half.
give credit to Saquon Barkley. I didn't expect him to put out that performance like he did.
So, I think the Vikings-Packers game, what were the Packers thinking not putting Jair Alexander on Justin Jefferson, just letting him just run like a madman out there with different plays? I mean, that was like a big thing here in Milwaukee that was brought up after the game was why did they not match up Jair Alexander, one of the best corners in the league, on Justin Jefferson, and play the zone? So whatever side of the field Jair Alexander was on, the Vikings schemed to put him on the opposite side of the field. That's just smart game planning right there. So I think like those two games and the Broncos last night losing,
That was bad.
that was bad. Hey, the first time since 1987 that back-to-back fumbles on the opposing team's 1 yard line. That hasn't happened since 1987. It's only the 11th time in the history of the league it's happened.
Wow.
10th and 11th, but back-to-back like that hasn't happened since 1987.
That's a
I mean,
nice
even
stat.
Rolo was a little bit disappointed last night in the Broncos' performance last night.
It was bad.
Let game balls in terms of good coaching in week. Oh, let's give a props to the Bears also, because they forced the 49ers to do the one thing that they wanted them to do. Force Trey Lance to be a quarterback rather than a runner. He's not completely NFL ready yet. And, and that showed, yes, on Sunday. So Trey Lance, not NFL ready yet for the quarterback. Maybe at some point you got to throw Jimmy G out there because teams are going to keep forcing that issue to Trey Lance where they're going to force him that if they want to win and score points, they're going to force Trey Lance to throw the ball, which is going to affect stats of Debo and George Kittle if he plays. And, plus they lost Elijah Mitchell now for 2 months. So that's going to affect the offense a little bit too for them. So teams that I'm not shocked at won week one. Kansas City, not shocked at all. I think Arizona is one of the softest teams in the league right now.
Baltimore put out a performance against the Jets.
And I think Arizona. Let me speak on Arizona. The Jets are the Jets. They didn't have Zach Wilson, so we don't really know what they are yet. That team's probably better than what they were on Sunday with the healthy, MILF-loving Zach Wilson. When you got Joe Flacco out there, it's going to be a different dynamic. But Arizona, since the second half of last season, has just been softer than Charmin. Okay? There's a reason why the Arizona Cardinals in the offseason, when they made that contract with Kyler Murray, that they put that provision in there originally about the game study. I like to call it the Jamarcus Russell provision, about 4 hours a week of game study, right? Because if anybody knows that old tale, the Raiders once gave Jamarcus Russell a blank VHS tape and gave it to Jamarcus Russell, told him to go home and watch the plays on the other team in the blitz packages. And the next day, they asked him what was on the tape, and he's like, oh, yeah, he was describing different things. It was a blank tape, so he was lying through his teeth. Well, you know what? Kyler Murray ain't ready. He doesn't have the mental game. He may have the physical tools, but in terms of reading defenses and the mental aspects of the game, it's lacking, along with the Cardinals' defense. I don't know what the stats are, but if you look up the Cardinals' statistics, I bet defensively since the second half of last season, I bet you they're in the bottom 7 of the league, if not worse. Their defense has just been atrocious, and offensively that affects the whole game plan. And not having Demetrius Hopkins out there for the next 6 weeks, I mean, even Rolo's upset. And I think the Cardinals are in severe trouble to get off this start, and I think this is a carryover from last season. And right now, I got to think Cliff Kingsbury's on the hot seat right now. I really do. I really think he's on the hot seat. He never really proved much at Texas Tech. He hasn't really proven much in the NFL. What has he won in the NFL going into his 4th year? What has he won? He made playoffs one time. And he got in. He was gifted an in and then got completely smoked. Okay? Like a reggae festival, he got smoked in the playoffs last year. They lost their way into the playoffs. They didn't win their way into the playoffs last year because they needed the Bears to lose, of all things, last year and all that scenario last year to have that happen. And that didn't happen last year. So the Chiefs look great. I think the Vikings look surprisingly well. I think the Steelers, hey, let me say this. That defense is something, but damn, losing TJ Watt for 6 to 8 weeks here.
That's bad.
Man, but that defense yesterday was impressive. The Cowboys are in severe trouble because they need a quarterback now.
I knew we was going to lose that game Sunday night.
Well, they were going to lose, but now you got to find a quarterback in a winnable NFC East. This opens things up for the Giants, and if Brian Daboll is a coaching genius, and it opens things up for the Eagles. Yes, the Eagles put up 38 points on Sunday against a hapless Detroit Lions defense, whose front 7 is among the worst in the league. But their new linebacker, Rodrigo, man, the kid is, I think, is going to be a gem, but the Lions cannot stop the run. They can't. I don't care if they have Aiden Hutchinson up there. Their defensive tackles are soft, and their linebackers, besides Rodriguez yesterday, played soft. On Sunday.
And by the way, we're doing the MLB player props at 7:50 p.m. Eastern time because we're doing it for like the late games, Jason. So if you get this message. Now, I was going to really say, like, if you had like the quarterbacks like a Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, that wasn't a surprise, by the way. I can go with Tua, by the way, because, of course, I knew they was going to beat New England because, let's be honest, New England's offense is, like, really bad. They may be, like, not only, like, 3rd place, but they probably not going to make it to the playoffs with the way that offense was because that offense for the Patriots was trash. I knew the Dolphins going to win that. And every time when New England goes to Miami, they always struggle. Well,
I think the problem with the Patriots isn't the defense. Guess who's calling plays for the Patriots this season?
Matt Patricia.
There's your answer. There is your answer. And you know how I feel about Matt Patricia. He is not a good coach in terms of play calling. He's not. And now you put him in charge of this offense that has no wide receivers. I mean, I think the Patriots got a decent defense. I'm not saying top 10, but they gave up 20 points, okay? 20 points they probably shouldn't have given up if it wasn't for that hapless deep offense. I'm not going to blame Mac Jones completely for this, but no offense, he has no wide receivers to throw to.
I agree.
I mean, if Justin Fields wants to complain about the Bears having the worst wide receiving core in the league, no, it's the Patriots. The Patriots have the worst wide receiver. They spent all of this money on tight ends, okay, and other things, and they didn't spend a dime on any top-notch. They got a bunch of 2s and 3s and 4s. You didn't go out and get an elite receiver. You didn't. They could have went out and got Tyreek Hill and opened that whole dynamic up and figured it all out and then had those other things. The Dolphins may very well be a playoff team. I'm not saying they're going to win the division, but I could see them getting in as a 7th seed. I mean, last year they finished, I believe, as the 8th best team in the AFC last year. You got to think they're improved. And if they play like that and let's say they beat the Jets both times, they handle the Patriots both times, that's 4 wins. You can get 6 wins out of the next, and they got to play the Lions, so that should be a W. So you're really thinking 5 wins. They can get 5 wins outside of their division and the Lions. They're probably going to make the playoffs at 10-7. I think the new standard is 10-7. Unless it's a really bad year, 9-8. And you got to be, 9-8 may get you in, but if you're 10-7, you're probably going to get in most years.
Like a wild card.
Rare, very rare. I mean, they're not going to win the division. Right. I mean, even Lady Godiva here doesn't think that they're going to win the division. But I mean, I think the Dolphins have a good secondary, an average front 7 on defense. The offensive line is average. But you got Tyreek Hill now stretching out the field. You got Gesicki. That running back by committee will be interesting. It's a matter of Tua. How much development are we going to have with Tua coming into this season?
And then also I looked at the Chargers as well because I knew they was going to beat the Raiders because the Raiders' defense was doo-doo, dog doo-doo.
It is doo-doo. That's the reason right now why the Raiders are going to remain doo-doo because they don't have a defense. You can have Devontae Adams, who had over 100 yards yesterday or Sunday. I think he had almost as many yards as the whole Packers wide receiving core yesterday. I mean, that's a whole other story we'll get into later here after 7:15. But you have Waller, you have Hunter Renfrow, and you have Devontae Adams. I'm not a big fan of Josh Jacobs and an average offensive line, but that defense is trash. I mean, they only gave up 24 yesterday or Sunday. They should be thankful that they were even close giving up 24. That's a credit to the defensive coordinator more than anything. And you got to remember the Chargers also lost Keenan Allen during the game. He was injured early in that game. I think the Chargers lost 2 of their top 4 receivers during that game, if I'm not mistaken.
I could check that out later on.
So I think they lost somebody else besides Keenan Allen. I don't know what the injury situation is on Keenan Allen. He's like one of my favorite receivers in the league. I just love the guy's work ethic. Usually as long as he stays healthy, he's always going to give you like 18 to 25 or more a week. Fantasy points. So you got to love him in that aspect. I mean, Lady Godiva drafted him last year. So I mean, hey, she's got love for him. But
all right.
We'll
But
talk
it
about
looks
the
like,
Packers issues in a bit.
but we got
after
the guest. We
college
got the
here.
guest. We got the guest. So right now, I'm going to host of the. Thank you, Scotty, for thank you that comment. By the way, host of the waiting room with Dr. SEC for the first time. This is Dr. SEC, as me and my co-host, as we're going to talk about college football. Of course, that was a great. That was a surprising week of college football, especially with them upsets. So, how are you doing, my friend? This is the first time I actually saw your face for the first time.
SEC.
Well, I'm doing a lot better than Jimbo Fisher. Well, he's doing better financially, but I'm doing a lot better than Jimbo Fisher was.
I think a lot of people are doing better than Jimbo Fisher. Right?
Right.
That was
I
a
don't
rough
know how many times people are going to schedule Appalachian State and not expect a tough fight.
And it looks like one of my former co-hosts said Keenan Allen is a home run or bust. Now that one I absolutely agree with. So I just want to get that out the way.
Let's talk a little bit about football. Let's talk a little bit about the horrible quarterback play in that game. In your mind, was that the main factor that probably cost Texas A&M that game?
Well, I mean, it's kind of you've got to believe at this juncture that Jimbo Fisher quarterback luster has worn off at Texas A&M, because I mean they've not had a lot of really solid college quarterback play since he's been there. It's up and down. Of course, last year quarterback played really well against Alabama, but for the most of the season they were up and down, replacing injuries, whatever it might be. So I just think the problem at Texas A&M is they haven't developed a quarterback. And since they haven't developed a quarterback that can consistently, play at that high level that's needed, they're going to continue to have this problem. I could see them losing many games this season. Quarterback play gets better. Obviously, they could be better. Defense is pretty solid still, but that quarterback play, I don't see how it gets any better. We've seen this now for a few years at Texas A&M.
So a loss like that, where would you, after that, how many losses do you think that Texas A&M is capable with a tough schedule, especially playing on the side where Alabama and Arkansas are on?
Right,
Arkansas is playing some pretty damn good football, and I mean I'm very intrigued with that Arkansas-Alabama game coming up here in a couple of weeks.
Right. I mean, look at two of their next three games, right? University of Miami, who's got enough offense to beat them. Arkansas, who's definitely can probably bully them up and down the field. Alabama, who's not as great as people want them to be really for last, I think we got a little bit of fool's gold, but you might get into that later last year. But, you got Ole Miss, you got Florida. I mean, all of those are losable games. LSU is a losable game. So if you look at their schedule, I'm not saying they're going to finish that way, but it's easy to see where they could. I'm going to tell you, South Carolina has a shot if they continue to get better as the season goes forward, and Beamer continues to develop them. They're kind of like that team, like you see a lot of times, like they're impressive at times, but they can't win. So we don't know if Beamer is going to be able to get them there, but it's not out of the question they can lose to them. So I definitely see a potential of 5 or 6 losses easily. I would say 5 or 6 at best 50-50 games for them this season.
It's interesting you bring up South Carolina, because now they've got Spencer Rattler there, the transfer from Oklahoma, last year's preseason Heisman Trophy candidate. Is he capable? Do you think he could be a 2-year starter? Or do you think he'll end up bolting for the league after this year? Because I see him where he's got all the tools, but I don't know if he's ready to maybe leave after this year. So he may play another 2 years. They may get the full 2 years of eligibility out of him, which could really help South Carolina progress here to something elite and get that Beamer ball tradition or bandwagon really going and bring some of that luster back to South Carolina. What's your feeling so far on Rattler so far?
I think it's going to come down to whether South Carolina can convince him that they're going to put enough talent around him to make his draft stock go up next year. He definitely needs to stay another year. I mean, he's got a world of talent, but he still at times has problems reading the field. He still at times is extremely inconsistent. But if they can show him that they're going to build enough, these players are going to develop around him he would be foolish not to come back that second year. Now, you never know what's going through the mind of a young man and what his situation may look like, but I don't expect him to put up the kind of numbers this year that are gonna land him high enough that it wouldn't be worth coming back next year. Now, again, sometimes you get in that situation that I've only got so many snaps I can take. So if this offensive line isn't going to protect me and these wide receivers aren't going to catch the ball, I'm better to just take my shot now and maybe land on a scout team or something, or not scout team, but a practice squad and build my way up. But I do think he's a very talented quarterback. I think he's got to grow up that only experience will give him. So I think 2 years would be great for him.
The game of the week in the conference, everybody overhyped, I don't want to say overhyped. Everybody hyped up the big Texas-Alabama matchup, rightfully so, besides getting the time slot that they didn't want due to the TV contracts.
Right.
But to me, the SEC game of the week wasn't that, looking in hindsight, even though it was a great game and you got one future team, but Kentucky, that program is on the rise.
Talk about that.
And right now they're the number 9 team in the country, and that team is real. Since they've gotten their head coach, I believe is in his fourth or fifth year now. Kentucky has had a really good recruiting. They've been able to hit Ohio extremely hard after like Michigan and Ohio State come in and pick. They're getting a lot of high 3s, low 4s kind of players, and getting players from Kentucky and other parts in recruiting. And the recruiting has really stepped up at Kentucky, along with some really good coaching. I mean, that program, I don't ever remember Kentucky being this highly ranked or looking this good. And I thought they played tremendous on the road at Florida, a Florida team that beat a ranked Utah team last week. How good is this Kentucky team? I mean, do they got a shot here, of doing some real damage here, or are we talking 8-4, or can we see something higher as this season goes on?
Well, I think if you look at what Mark Stoops has done at Kentucky, I think the over-under every year now is about 8 games. Like, can they go over that 8 games? Can they get under that 8 games? They're always extremely competitive. They've had a couple seasons there where they even had a wide receiver play quarterback pretty much the whole season, their best player, play quarterback, and still managed to be competitive, And so I think what he's built there is pretty phenomenal. I think it's I don't want to get Kentucky fans mad at me, but it's not going to get a lot better than it is right now, because they're going to be a powerhouse to be a contestant for that number 2 spot almost every year. I don't think they're going to catch a Georgia. That talent gap is always going to be there. But here's the thing about a team like Kentucky. They can kind of become a team like Auburn, right? That, like, if they get a Cam Newton transfer all of a sudden, like, this team is built up enough around. If they get the right guy at the right position at the right time, they can make a 1-year run. They're not going to consistently beat Georgia, but they are going to consistently compete with Florida, which used to not be a thing. Like, I remember when years and years and years and years went by before that was ever going to be a game again. They obviously, I think, are ahead of most teams in the SEC East right now. And I think they should feel pretty good, because Mark Stoops is a lot like Sam Pittman. I think that what makes Sam Pittman's situation so sweet is Sam Pittman loves being at the University of Arkansas. I think you would really have to bring something special to pull Mark Stoops away from Kentucky. I think he feels the same way about that fan base. Maybe not the head basketball coach after the little tip they had this year when he referred to it as a basketball school, but I think it's really impressive. And I think the most impressive thing about Kentucky, their best player has not played yet. Their running back has been suspended. And so when he makes that return, this guy is a projected high first, second round draft pick. This is a guy that can make a difference. So they're going to be able to run and grind the football against some teams. They're going to be able to control the clock against some teams. And I think they're going to be really, really good at the end of the season.
Speaking of Stoops and Sam Pittman, I think they've done tremendous jobs. Arkansas was about as bad as you can get near the end of the Bielema era. Yes, you're kind of playing with some of those recruits that Bielema had, but systems and players kind of have to mesh. And that system that Beamer had, that they ran, just didn't mesh at Arkansas. That's more of a Big Ten type of system now, which is becoming pretty successful at Illinois lately. And can, will Arkansas and Kentucky be able to keep those two guys? I mean, I think there's some of the best coaches in the country. I mean, we know the SEC has money, but when you get a school that has more money or a little bit more prestige on the level of an alert, kind of like, Brian Kelly leaving Notre Dame because he's thinking, well, I'm never going to be able to win this thing. So I'm going to go to LSU and get a Southern accent and try to think that I can win it all. And maybe I'll turn as purple as I can the jersey. What's your feelings? Are those two capable of staying for a long time, or are we going to see a move eventually?
I think Stoops could be pulled away with the right circumstances, the right team, the right situation. I don't think he's looking to go anywhere. But I do think that the right situation, it might be able to get him. Sam Pittman, I think that Kirby Smart could retire today and Georgia could offer Sam Pittman the job, and I don't think he would take it. Like, he is the most Arkansas Razorback guy that there has ever been, and he loves that fan base. He's all about the big hogs up front. He's all about blue-collar football. I mean, this guy is a perfect fit at the University of Arkansas, and I really truthfully believe there's not a program in the country that could pull Sam Pittman away from the University of Arkansas. I've never seen a coach love where he is as much as Sam Pittman loves being at Arkansas, and they took a gamble on him for that reason. To go from an offensive line coach with no offensive coordinator, no play calling, none of that, and to put him as the guy to run your program. They knew what Sam Pittman was made of because of his time at Arkansas beforehand, and they obviously did a great job at Georgia. I can tell you, I interviewed some of the players, some of the recruits that Pittman signed right before he left, and they were heartbroken. But you remember back when he left Arkansas the first time, when he left Arkansas, the offensive line showed up at his house to try to convince him not to leave. But he knew that if he was going to become a head coach, he had to make that step. But I don't think he would. I mean, crazy things have happened, but I would be shocked if Sam Pittman left the University of Arkansas.
Let's talk a little bit about Ole Miss. They're maybe not getting the love,
Mm-hmm.
What is this Ole Miss team this season? They're in the top 20. Not really getting a lot of media love right now. What can we expect from this team? I mean, are we talking 8-4? We haven't really hit the meat of the schedule yet. What is this Ole Miss team? Because they're probably one of the teams that just aren't getting a lot of media love nationally, it seems. I don't hear Ole Miss like anywhere.
Right.
Yeah, I think the problem is with Lane Kiffin, do you ever really know what you're going to get with Lane Kiffin? I mean, there's the good and the bad, right? Like, Lane Kiffin's the same guy that took a running back at Alabama, turned him into a Heisman candidate at quarterback and did really well. But I do like a lot of the tools they got there. The thing about them is that like a third of their team almost is transfers. So it's going to take a while. I mean, they had an unbelievable amount of transfers this year, including, I think, one that's, Zach Evans, the running back, that originally #1 recruit in the country, verbally committed to the University of Georgia behind the scenes. And right before he was about to make the public announcement, he pulls back because Georgia pulled the offer from the #1 running back in the country because of some problems that he had at his high school right before the state championship game. He goes to TCU, plays really well when he, at TCU, transfers to Ole Miss. I have no doubt as the season goes forward that Lane Kiffin is going to find unique ways to use him. The question for them overall is going to be how quickly can these transfers really begin? I mean, you saw even last week, or last press conference, he wanted to transfer to Ole Miss type T-shirt during the thing. He's really relying on that at Ole Miss, and it's going to just be a matter with transfers how quickly they pan out. I think they're going to be a good football team, but I still think that Arkansas is ahead of them. I think that other teams, they're right there in that third spot, though, to really compete with anybody and possibly move up further. But I think they're definitely probably kind of locked in at number 3 right now, in my mind. Anyway.
Let's talk about a team that usually gets a lot of hype, but so far this year, is a little bit under the radar and they probably have one of the biggest games in the conference this weekend, even though it's a non-conference game. Let's talk about Auburn this weekend. Auburn, Penn State. I mean, to me, that's like one of the games of the week. You got Penn State, a team with a so-so quarterback, a team that probably did not deserve to beat Purdue, but did. Offensive line's a little lacking. Has one of the top running back recruits in the country. The passing core is a little weak. The defense is pretty good. We know a little bit about Penn State. What do we know about Auburn? I mean, I know the point spread's around 3 points in this game, give or take, depending where you're looking at the books. What is Auburn? Because, I mean, they're just off the radar and have not got any publicity. I mean, this game could kind of really shoot them up or shoot them down.
Have you checked that? Is that line still at 3?
Last I saw, but that could have changed since.
Well, I think I might take some money out of savings and go put that down on Penn State, because I'm not a big fan of Auburn, of what they have, what they're producing, and I mean the game last week, a perfect example. Struggling with a team that they should have been able to put away pretty easily in past years. I'm just not a big believer in really anything that Auburn is producing. I like a few of their players individually, but I really don't like many of their positions overall. I think they're in for a very long year. I think that they're very fortunate that they pulled Missouri out of the East, because this is going to be a potentially long season for them. I wish I could really tell you, usually I say, well, I don't really like the offensive line, but I like what they have. I don't like a whole lot about Auburn at all. I don't. And James Franklin in this matchup, I'll take James Franklin every time in this matchup against Auburn's coach.
And I did check the line. Penn State is favored by 3, and the total is 48. So just want to let you know about that.
Yeah, I'm gonna leave that 48 alone, but I'm gonna go after that 3. I'm not gonna put a lot down, but I might put it down.
It's kind of iffy.
Let me bring up this last Saturday's Alabama-Texas game. Because, even though Texas lost, Texas won. Because it's kind of vindicated Mr. 5-7, as I like to call him, Steve Sarkisian. And maybe he does have something going, but it does look like Bama is on a down year. Not as quite as much offensive talent. The offensive line definitely not as good at Alabama this year as Bryce Young was running for his life a lot. How much of that is due to scheme play because of Sarkisian knowing a lot of the intricacies of Alabama? Who knows, being a former assistant there. How good is this Alabama team? I mean, you have 2 premier pass rushers in the current Heisman Trophy winner. I mean, can they run the table on their side of the SEC before playing that powerhouse in Georgia right now? Because, I mean, I have to admit, I can't see that team beating Georgia right now. It's almost like they put the B team out there Saturday against Samford.
Well, I tell you, if the thing about it is, if it was one game, I would look at this Alabama team and I would say it happens. It don't happen much to Nick Saban, but it happens, right? But if you actually look at Alabama last year, this was Alabama's team most of last year. I mean, they almost lost several games. I mean, you talk about the Florida game, you talk about the Auburn game, you talk about the LSU game, they lost to Texas A&M, eventually lost to Georgia. What the fool's gold, I think, is that Alabama caught Georgia in the SEC championship with the flu and guys throwing up everywhere and really kind of peaked at the right time to get into that place. They weren't Alabama last year, right? We weren't used to seeing all of those close games. I think it was like 5 games that were decided within just they had to come back against a really bad Auburn team on the last drive to win, kind of like this Texas game this week. LSU, I mean, how bad were they against LSU? They just got hot at the right time. When you got as much talent as Alabama does, sure, you can run that schedule, but they have some very big problems I don't see going away. Number one, you mentioned it. That offensive line is not very good. They're not to the level, that they need them to be at. Number two, those wide receivers are good, but they're not the wide receivers we've seen for the last decade. I mean, they're used to 3 first-rounders everywhere you turn, and they're not those guys this time. Jermaine Burton transferred from the University of Georgia to Alabama. I can tell you, I don't think Jermaine Burton was going to get many snaps this year. Who Georgia had ahead of him were better than him. He's a guy that can take the top off of it. Yes, he's a guy that can make big plays. Extremely inconsistent, extremely, an unbelievable 3 touchdown game, and then he won't show up again for 6 weeks, right? That's what they have right now at wide receiver. And then you got to question, man, they don't have a lot of faith in their running game, right? Like I went back to that Utah State game, and I was saying during the Utah State game, it's really weird to me that inside the 5-yard line, Alabama won't line up and run the football. They were throwing, 2 and 3 yard touchdown passes because they didn't really convince that they could run against a really bad Utah State team.
That's terrible.
And I thought at first, I said, well, maybe they're just padding Bryce Young's stats. When you saw them last week, anytime they got 4th and short, they weren't very successful. They were very shied away from it. So I think they have some major problems on that offense where, yes, there are going to be games that they're going to look elite, and then there's going to be a lot of games they're not going to be very good. I do think the defense is going to be better. I do think that, that they'll be better than they were even Saturday, but they'll get much better as the year goes forward. But that offense, they got an unbelievable guy at quarterback who can read the field, but he can't run wide receivers open and he can't run the football. Well, if he continues to run the football like he is now, he's not going to make it through the season. He's just
Does Alabama make it undefeated before the SEC title?
I don't think so. I think you'll see what you saw last year. You're going to see them drop at least one game to an Arkansas. That's another one. Arkansas had them on the ropes, right? Arkansas almost beat them last year as well. That's another one of those teams that were really close. I think they lose at least one game in the regular season. It's really going to be do one of the other teams like a growing LSU team, right? Maybe Kelly's got them playing really well. Does an Ole Miss team surprise them with some razzle dazzle? Because at the end of the day, I'm not taking away that they're a really good football team. They are, but that fear that you have when Alabama used to get off the bus, that it's just a matter about how much, that's going to be gone now. For 2 years, that'll be gone, really.
Let's jump a little bit outside the SEC here. Notre Dame. Marcus Freeman has lost 3 games. He lost his bowl game. He lost to Ohio State. And then he lost his game to Marshall. Now, during the offseason, this man went on a recruiting spree like no tomorrow.
Right.
Is the mystique going to wear up, and are we going to see some decommits out of this? If we kind of see this now that this quarterback's been hurt and is out probably for the season, and the great defensive schemes that they had that got Notre Dame up to number 5 last year before they lost in the bowl game, and then losing to Ohio State in the close game. But then it's like they looked ahead of that for Marshall, thought they were just going to mollywop Marshall. And Marshall let's just admit it, they beat the brakes off of them Saturday. Right. I don't care if it was 5 points.
Right.
They had no heart in that game. That's 3 losses in a row. The man hasn't won a game yet. How much is this going to affect recruiting? Because he was taking players from Michigan and other top Power 5 schools, and it might not affect like C.J. Carr because now that quarterback spot's going to be wide open. He'll probably start as a freshman. But you get to those other positions now. I mean, they don't have talent at the wide receiver. You have a top 20 tight end NFL draft-wise, but that's really it at Notre Dame right now. I mean, is this going to affect Notre Dame long-term if this continues? Because obviously they play like this. They're not going to beat Clemson. They're not going to beat USC. I mean, we could be looking at 5-6 losses with this team now.
Right.
A team that was projected early on as a possible CFP candidate.
Yeah. I think as long as you stay around 5 losses, maybe 6 losses, you'll be okay in that first year because, usually with those coaches, now you never know with 18-year-old kids, and you especially never know with the rise of them being able to make money and cash in and what that'll look like, what options might come available. But I think that first of all, he's a player's coach. Like, players love that guy. Like, you remember when he was announced, like, his people were going crazy. Now, that only lasts so long. You got to win football games, and you can't lose to Marshall. But I think he's okay as long as he only loses 4, 5, 6 games. I think he's okay in recruiting because he's going to build that up. That, hey, Kelly left us bare, but you're going to come in. You're going to be the change. Now, next year, if that happens, I think you've got a big problem. Like, this could be a huge setback. But I'm really cheering for this guy because I think that, number one, he's not a D-bag. I don't know what our rating is on this show. He's not a D-bag.
Yeah, we gotta keep it Christ-like. Gotta keep it Christ-like.
You go ahead. We're cool with it. Go ahead.
Okay, he's not gonna be a D-bag like Kelly. So you like him, so that's a good thing, right? So, like,
he doesn't turn purple.
They're trying to fake a Southern accent, as you said, or I guess they're in Indiana, so that wouldn't fly anyway. But I think he's genuine, and I think that people are seeing that at Notre Dame because Kelly never was seen as genuine. He never was seen as authentic. He always seemed to be a guy to a lot of people with that, that he just didn't have that connectability that they have now. And so I'm cheering for him. I hope he does well. But you're right. There's losses you take, and then there's Marshall. And so he better hope that Marshall runs the table, and that won't look as bad going forward, Right. But it's everybody nervous.
I'll tell you this: the streaming of We Are Marshall definitely went up on Netflix.
Like that movie. Watch that one. Go ahead.
Yep. So let's talk Big Ten here. Scott Frost.
Mm-hmm.
He probably had one of the best 3-9 teams in the country last year. Tons of losses. Lost to Oklahoma close. Lost to Michigan close. A lot of those losses were close. This year, the expectations were high. Got a new transfer quarterback who was really good last year in Texas. You lose to Northwestern in Ireland. Okay? Then last week, you lose to Georgia Southern at home. That's it. Gone.
Yeah.
Now, you got to think to yourself like you knew it was coming. But you don't think they could have held off for another 3 weeks till October 1st and saved themselves $7.5 million? I mean, was it that bad that you paid this guy $7.5 million more? I mean, the season's already shot, but you couldn't wait 3.5 more weeks to reduce that buyout from $15 million to $7.5 million. I mean, that signals to me that the culture, even with the big change, there were some serious issues inside the program to make a switch like that they couldn't wait to make a $7.5 million savings. Okay? Yeah. That's 1/4 of your Big Ten television revenue that you just shot out the window by you not being able to wait 3.5 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Where does Nebraska go from here? I mean, rumors are they talked to Deion Sanders, which I just, no offense, I don't see Deion Sanders leaving Jackson State, especially with his son there and the whole HBCU thing that he's really hyping. I mean, the only job I could ever see, I think Deion Sanders leaving for right now would be Florida State if Mike Norvell ever left and taking that over. Other than that, I don't see that happening. So what candidates are we probably looking at? Because now Nebraska's in the forefront and can really get who they want. Are they just going to sit there all season and just get picked off again? I mean, who knows what other elite jobs come up? But, I mean, Nebraska doesn't have the luster it once had under the top regime of the 90s and Bo Pelini after and so on. I mean, what are we looking at in terms of, the name that comes to mind to me would be Dave Aranda from Baylor. I mean, how that guy didn't get the LSU job over Brian Kelly when he was on that Ed Orgeron staff, proved himself at Baylor, proved himself at Wisconsin, okay? I mean, I know Baylor's a damn good job, don't get me wrong, and it's in the Big 12, but the Big 12 is in flux right now, and you don't know what's going to happen. I'm shocked the guy didn't get the LSU job. I really am. To me, he's got to be the favorite for the Nebraska job. I just don't know the fit because of the cultural issues. What have we heard so far in those rumblings?
I'll start by saying that as far as the money goes, it's hard to measure how much you pay to get away paying within the family, and that was the problem that Scott Frost was. He was a son to the University of Nebraska, and so for each week that this went on, it was more painful than it was if it was just some guy. Like, this is the guy that everybody in that stadium used to wear his jerseys when they came there to play, and so it hurts a little bit more. The pain is a little bit harder, and the spotlight's a lot brighter locally when it's your son. It's your guy that last led you promised, and quite honestly, probably the last time Nebraska will ever be like that. Because first of all, number one, I don't think it's that great of a job. Like, I've been to the University of Nebraska many times, and they have these sellout crowds. To me, it's a very wine and cheese crowd. And I'll be honest with you, like, we have to look at the cultural reality of how many non-white people really want to go there to play in big numbers from the big city. Like, it's the reality, right? Like, it's the truth. I've been there.
A lot of corn.
Yeah, you have
nothing wrong with corn. It's a lot of protein, though.
Hey, a lot of steak. Hey, protein. There's a lot of steak out there. Omaha steaks.
A lot of corn. That's all I ever see when I go through is a lot of corn. But
hey, nothing wrong with corn.
but I like the University of Nebraska, but I think they have to be realistic about who they are.
Correct.
And they're in a situation right now. They're not like, it's different at Alabama. Like, yes, Alabama went down for a while, but it's different at the University of Alabama because they opened the bank and gave facilities that nobody else could compete with except for Oregon at the time. They did all of these things that nobody else was doing, and they went and got Nick Saban, and they did. I don't think you can bring somebody to Nebraska like that. So I think you have to find somebody that is either, like you said, that has been passed over, like we're talking about, or somebody that is looking for a stepping stone. And Nebraska fans don't want to hear that, but they are now that type of job. And until something changes, unless there's a Sam Pittman out there that can fall in love with Nebraska, I don't see it happen. I think a guy that if they were to open the books, if I was them, that I would look at, especially when you talk about SEC, I think the one we talked about earlier, Mark Stoops, is a guy that maybe, if you go to him, he's shown that he can recruit in places that aren't normally easy to recruit in. He's proven that time and time again. But I think outside of him, maybe you take a look at a coordinator. I just don't know. I think if you go to Baylor first and you take a truck down there and you open the thing, and maybe this assistant coach is the first black head coach at the University of Nebraska in the history of the school. So that's a step forward at least. But man, it's going to be hard to get kids from Atlanta to want to go to Omaha. It's going to be hard. It's a tough job. You got to find a guy with a system and an ability to recruit. It's almost like a Stanford now to me. It's like a place that's going to be harder to recruit through. You got to recruit certain type of players that want to go there.
Speaking of coaching and talent and stepping stones, College Game Day this week is in Boone, North Carolina this week at Appalachian State, which also has one of the most beautiful college baseball settings I've ever seen. And speaking of all that coaching, the Sun Belt doing some damage last week, and tearing Appalachian State. You got some talent, Troy, Appalachian State, and some other schools. I just think the Sun Belt is just doing some serious work right now, and I think some of those coaches, especially the coach at Appalachian State, he's got his men prepared every week. Penn State, they beat them 2 years ago, in a close game. Penn State wasn't ranked, but it was close at Penn State. They ran the ball over them. Texas A&M now nobody's going to think about Michigan, thank God, for a while. Texas A&M finally kind of, even though Appalachian State was 1AA back then, but still, so I think that's real interesting. real quick, because I know we got a short amount of time.
Right.
Who's your top 4 teams right now? If we were going to do the college football playoff right now, who's the top 4 on your?
Oh man, that's a tough one. I would say, like, as far as my, are we talking about who I think will make it, or who are my 4?
Right now, as of week 3, I have you on ESPN right now, and it's the Dr. SEC college football playoff. Congratulations, you're the selection committee. It's just you. all the other guys, we shipped them off to Dr. Pepper land.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they're in the Dr. Pepper factory drinking Dr. Pepper right now. It's just you.
Yeah,
who's your top 4?
Well, I think number 1 for me is obvious. It's University of Georgia. I think that first of all, just what they have at tight end, like they really have 4 NFL high draft picks at tight end on their team right now. They're really, if Stetson Bennett stays healthy, and he seems to be playing much smarter, like he's throwing the ball away instead of being the gunslinger all the time. And I think Georgia's a clear number 1 right there right now. Hey, it gets real tough after that. I mean, like, I guess I would go with Ohio State, because if you got to bet this early, you want to bet on a great quarterback. And I think that Stroud's a great quarterback. I don't know. I mean, they've had a way of not being as impressive as you thought. That's tough. I think that Georgia, Ohio State, man, you're gonna make me.
It's tough.
You're gonna have to start thinking about this, because as a season,
I'm gonna pick Arkansas for the upset to get in there.
Wow.
And then, man, I can't put 2 SEC and 2 Big Ten teams.
No, that would be fair.
I mean, are we talking USC? Are we talking Michigan? Are we talking Clemson? I mean, can Clemson run the table in the ACC?
I would say, if you're going to look at a team that has an outside chance to get better as the season goes forward and just kind of limp their way in there, maybe not deserving, I would say Oklahoma. I think they could get better and limp their way in there. I'm never, like, I don't know why, but I can't stand Lincoln Riley now. So nothing within me is going to give him any credit, because I think he's a scumbag.
Well, it's interesting you bring up Oklahoma, and I was going to bring this up, but I forgot earlier in the show. Oklahoma's downfall usually isn't the offense.
Right.
It's the defense. Put up a lot of points, but when push comes to shove, they're a sieve. Okay? And last year, that defense was atrocious.
Right.
And now you lost both of your top quarterbacks, via transfer, and you've lost a lot of talent in the pipeline. Mm-hmm. But somehow you're still in the top 10 and kicking butt, which is great.
Right.
But how much better is that defense going to be once you get into true Big 12 play? And you're going to face all of that talent. You're going to have to face, obviously, it looks like a better Texas team. Baylor, Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, which has a ton of firepower. And last year had a really good defense, even though they lost their defensive coordinator to Ohio State. I mean, can this Oklahoma team prevail? I mean, Oklahoma State's also top 10 right now. So you have 2 Oklahoma teams in the top 10. I mean, Baylor did lose to BYU shockingly over the weekend. And that was with BYU having two starters out, which was somewhat impressive, even though it was at BYU and an elevation. Don't know how much of a factor that totally played. Have to think somewhat. What do we expect? Oklahoma State. I mean, Baylor, you could probably say they're out because of the one loss. I mean, can Oklahoma or Oklahoma State, one of those teams, run the table here?
Yeah, I think that both teams could potentially run the table. But I think if you look at the schedules, you look at what they have on the roster, I think Oklahoma has the best shot of slipping into the playoffs undeservingly. Like, I don't think they're very good. I think that Michigan would beat Oklahoma. It's not, I'm not choosing Michigan over Oklahoma because I think Oklahoma's better than Michigan. I think Michigan would probably make Oklahoma quit in the fourth quarter and win by a couple touchdowns. But the reality is, are they going to be willing to put 2 Big Ten teams into the playoffs? And I'm not saying they're not deserving, but are they going to be willing to? Oh, they'll do it for the SEC with ease. They always have.
No question about that. That's a no-brainer.
Unfairly so. Like, why do teams automatically get passes just because they're in the SEC? If they didn't play anybody out of conference, they didn't win their championship. I don't care if their name's Alabama. They don't deserve to be in there, even if they go and win it. Like, this schedule is so short and the season's so short. People shouldn't get in without qualifications just because we think they're great.
Let's ask this question. Let's say Oklahoma wins the Big 12 but goes 12-1.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And Michigan, let's say, loses to Ohio State but wins all their other games, and then Ohio State goes on and wins the Big 10. But that loss, let's say, to Ohio State was overtime, lost by 3.
Something like that.
It goes double overtime.
Like
in
under
a tight
5.
game on the road. Who's getting in?
If I'm deciding, or the college playoff committee.
Once again, the guys are drinking their Dr. Pepper, chilling out with blue and muscle. This is you. Oklahoma 12-1, Big 12 champs, or Michigan running the gauntlet but losing at Ohio State in double overtime by 3. Who's getting in?
I don't even think it's
and Ohio State's undefeated.
Yeah, I don't care. It doesn't have to be a triple overtime or double overtime or anything like that. Like, I think Michigan, if I'm deciding, Michigan's going to be a better team than Oklahoma. The only team that I look at and I say, will they be better out of the other conferences is USC. I hate to say it, but USC.
They played really good so far, but
they have some tools there.
It's going to be a true test at Utah. On the road, they went into Stanford and kicked their butt. I didn't think that was going to be
nobody ever expected that.
I mean, those last 2 touchdowns were garbage touchdowns, okay? That game was really more of a 41-14 game. By that time it was toast. Everybody was on their way to the Giants baseball game at that point.
If the rest of the season if the rest of the season looks like it looks today, I think I would take 2 teams out of the Big Ten over probably any other conference right now, and that'll get a lot of boos on the SEC side. But what have they done? In 2 weeks Georgia has looked great. Alabama played 6-12 University and barely beat Texas. On the other side, Florida looked good the first game, but not really good. Like, more like Utah State was like, here you go, here's a gift. It's really hot in the swamp. I haven't seen anybody that's really wowed me outside of Georgia and SEC and potentially Arkansas. Like, I love the fact that they can bully ball you. I love the fact that their quarterback gets no respect. This guy has, Arkansas doesn't have the talent for a lot of room for error. They're not like Georgia. Their quarterback can't go out and have 3 picks and then win a football game. But they have a quarterback that doesn't turn the football over. Like, he had 3 interceptions last year, and he's never had a multi-interception game in his career.
Wow.
This is a guy that's going to take care of the football. He's going to make plays with his arms and his legs. Like, Arkansas has a lot of, they could go either way, right? They're one of those teams that you could see them go, 7-5, or they could run and surprise everybody and win the West. But I think if it comes down to, everybody in the West has 2 losses. Now, they're going to put Alabama in if they got 8 losses. Like, they don't care. But the Big Ten to me looks really impressive early on. Like, I see that potential there, that they should be getting looked at for 2 teams if you're going to put a non-conference champion in.
I would absolutely agree with that. Michigan and Ohio State. Mm-hmm. No question about that.
Well, and I think there's depth from there. Like, there's not a lot of – it's kind of like the SEC usually has 2 really elite teams, and then they got some really good teams. And I think the Big is like that now. I think they got a lot of really competitive football teams that are going to be tough outs for whoever's following them. Their records may not be off the chart, but they got some tough guys up there. They got some great coaches in that league. So I think that they need to be looked at.
Now, where can my listeners find you on social media for those that are listening on the audio feed?
Yeah, you can go to the THEDRSEC on Twitter, or you can go to your Roku, your Amazon, your Apple TV and type in Dr. SEC TV network, or just Dr. SEC, and it'll come up. And you can follow us on there as well.
All right. Thank you so very much. It was a great pleasure talking to you.
Pleasure having you. Please come back again soon.
Hey, anytime. I enjoyed it, guys. Thank you for having me.
SEC.
But anyway, it was a
doctor.
And I was getting ready to say with Scott Frost, he lucky, like if he wasn't in the Big Ten East, he would have been fired a long time ago.
You probably wouldn't have made it through last season.
Exactly.
Real quick here.
Let's do the SuperDraft show. Let's do the SuperDraft show. All right, let's do the player product. All right, we have Darvish, 2.5 ERA against the Mariners.
I'll take the over.
Okay. The next one, it is Trent Grisham, 0.5 bases against the Mariners.
If he starts, I'll take the over. All you need is a walk.
Gotcha. Next one, it is starting pitcher Murlo Kellis with 5.5 hits allowed against the Dodgers.
Over. It's the Dodgers lineup.
All right.
He got 97 wins.
Next one, Trea Turner, 1.5 bases against the Diamondbacks.
Trey Turner, as long as he starts, plays a full game, gotta take the over.
Gotcha. The next one, Mookie Betts, 1.5 bases.
Gotta take the over as long as he's starting.
Okay. And then finally, you have Joey Bart, the catcher from the San Francisco Giants, 0.5 bases against the Braves.
Who depends who's pitching for the Braves. So you want to look at that. 0.5, like I said, it's a walk or a single, a hit by pitch. Your chances are probably, if the guy, probably got to take at least an over on half a base, because as long as you reach first base, you're there. Usually those half base matchups, I usually really like those picks because, like I said, all you need is a hit by pitch, a walk, a single, some kind of miracle just to get on first base. I mean, so I'll take the over. As long as he's starting, you're probably going to know he's going to get 2 to 3 at-bats before maybe he gets pulled for a defensive substitution or a runner later in case. So you're probably good for 3 at-bats most likely with a batting average in the mid-2s. There's probably a chance that he'll probably get a half a base.
Gotcha. Now, if you see that QR code, now if you have a tablet, you can scan it. Now, if you have a phone, I recommend you full screening that QR code. That will take you to SuperDraft Pro, which is the exclusive fantasy partner of Caesars Entertainment. And the good thing about this is it is a free-to-play daily fantasy and the sports book. So you're not betting money, you're actually betting using virtual coins to use those games as well. And we have 4 packages. So the bigger the package is, the better you can play those games as well. So you can play up to if you have 100, you can play up to four games. If you have 3, you can play up to 3, vice versa. So if you have any questions about that, you have my contact number for those of you that are listening, or email me at sean.stewart@sportsforamerica.com. And also
a big shout out to Nerd Drink.
Nerd Focus.
There's also of the show, so let's give them a big shout out. Go check them out. Go check out the product.
Right, and it's on the website at sportsforamerica.com. And also, I'd like to welcome those that are listening on the Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, and you can also listen to it on the website at sportsforamerica.com. So if you do miss the player props, it will be shortened, by the way, so that way you can get that player props as well as we do the late night games. All right, we're going to be on Thursday at the same time at 7 o'clock.
Thursday, week 3 college football, week 2 NFL, and the big boxing fight that we've been waiting for about 3 years. GGG Canelo 3. I mean, this should have happened a while ago. Somebody tainted meat. These guys don't like each other. I definitely want to talk about it. Probably right at the beginning of the show. I want to talk about it because I know otherwise we'll lose track.
And fantasy football, of course.
So and player props for sure.
Also with Thursday Night Football, it will not be on television. It will be on Amazon Prime. So just letting you guys know about that, so you guys won't lose your crap. So yeah, it won't. But it'll be produced by the NFL Productions, and Al Michaels and Kurt Hurtstreet with the call. Those of you who want to know about Thursday Night Football.
Just wonderful.
Thank you. So we will see you guys Thursday. Thank you for those that are joining. And also, it will be on the Instagram, by the way, the full video and the interview as well with Dr. FCC as well. So you guys have a nice and wonderful evening. Take care.
We'll see you Thursday.
See you Thursday.